We talked about Laswell's formula, very linear. Now, Schramm's mass communication model, you can see, is not necessarily as linear. We've got some interesting things happening over here in this yellow circle. I'll talk about those in just a second. So we start over here to the left, the encoder, the interpreter, the decoder. As a communicator, you are all of these things at one time. If you've taken other communication classes, you might recognize these words. So encoding is assigning meaning to a message as the communicator or as the sender of a message. We also have to interpret feedback and decode feedback along with encoding our own messages. So we have this communicator that sends identical messages. So this is a broadcasting network or a public health organization or whatever this is, right? The access to many people. We're sending the same identical message to, these are people, right? Let's think about these little circles as people. And an example of this might be when we went on lockdowns for COVID, we received those messages, those instructions via multiple platforms. So the mass audience, each decoding, interpreting, and encoding, that's these little circles over here. You'll see they're connected. So they are sharing information amongst themselves. If you remember back to lockdowns and COVID, there were different groups of people who felt differently about our lockdowns. I know that the younger population was really upset about the lockdowns, and people who had immune compromised illnesses were not so upset about those lockdowns, right? So you have these different connections, networks, we'll say, communicating about the identical message that everybody's receiving. And then we also see this place for feedback right here. It is indirect feedback, so I can't call up the broadcaster person at NBC and talk to them directly. But I can go leave reviews, or I can leave comments, or I can write them a letter even. So Schramm's is a little bit different. It's not as linear. It is different than Laswell's. It doesn't even really give you a place for the channel. So an interesting note. Let's talk briefly about the functions of mass communication. We have the first one, surveillance of the environment. So this is, and surveillance is not like spying, but it's just observing the environment. Here's my dog. If you haven't met him, his name is Jamie. He's trying to get me to take him outside to walk. Surveillance of the environment is like watching the news every day, or just to know what's going on in the world, or watching the weather even. Then we have correlation of parts of society. So we're trying to understand people and places and things that aren't necessarily like my individual self. So I'm trying to see what's going on the West Coast to understand how it fits into my life on the East Coast, for example. And we can also look at how we consume mass media regarding other countries too, and how those parts of society are correlated. And then cultural transmission is where we consume mass media, and there is something to be learned about other cultures. And again, this is related back to people who are different, right, than yourself, that you're learning something about. And then entertainment is what it sounds like. We watch entertainment media all the time for entertainment purposes. So an example of this, of I guess maybe 3 of these. I don't know if any of you have seen True Detective, Night Country. There are several different seasons, and it's an anthology. So you can start at Night Country. It's the most recent one. And it was set in Alaska. and it was like the super north part of Alaska, right? So there were some, and I'm not going to give it away, but I watched True Detective because I find it entertaining, right? I also understand more after watching, and I'm sure it's not all accurate, just like nothing. I mean, it's not an accurate representation of all of Alaska, of course, but particularly that segment of Alaska. I understand more than I did before that there is a native Alaskan peoples who are faced with some major environmental injustice. So there's this cultural transmission and correlation of parts of society. Okay, I'm gonna pause here. I hope that example, if you haven't watched True Detective, I'm sorry. Email me if you have questions.